Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Wanderer and watched the stars change outside the window. This was supposed to be a simple test flight. Take the ship out, check if the new faster-than-light drive worked, and come back home too. Earth, nothing too complicated. Drive status report, she called to her engineer. Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from his control panel. His face was covered in sweat. Captain, something's wrong with the navigation computer. The readings don't make sense. Dr. Elizabeth Park, the ship's science officer, checked her instruments. The star patterns are all wrong. These constellations don't match anything in our star maps. Captain Chun felt her stomach drop. She had been afraid of this. The new drive was experimental. No one really knew what would happen when they turned it on for the first time. Now it looked like they were lost. Where are we? She asked. I don't know, Dr. Park replied. But look at that, she pointed out the main window. In front of them was a massive planet covered in cities. The lights from the cities were so bright they could see them from space. Huge ships moved around the planet like metal whales swimming in the darkness. Those aren't human ships, pilot Jake Morrison said. His voice was quiet with shock. The ships were beautiful and terrible at the same time. They were long and smooth, made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Energy shields shimmered around them like soap bubbles. Weapons that looked like they could destroy mountains stuck out from their sides. Captain, Communications Officer Lisa Wang called out, I'm getting signals, lots of them. They're not speaking any Earth language. Suddenly alarms started going off all over the ship. Red lights flashed on every control panel. The Wanderer shook as something grabbed it with an invisible force. We're caught in some kind of tractor beam, Rodriguez reported. I can't break free. Captain Chun looked out the window again. More alien ships were appearing around them, dozens of them. Then hundreds. They surrounded the little human ship like sharks around a wounded fish. On the largest alien ship, Admiral Kethver studied the strange vessel that had appeared above his home planet. He was tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. His uniform was covered in medals from 100 battles. He had never lost a fight in his long career. What is that thing? He asked his second-in-command. Unknown, Admiral. It appeared out of nowhere. Our sensors say it's made of simple metal alloys. No energy shields, primitive weapons. It should not be able to travel faster than light, but somehow it got here. Admiral Kethver looked closer at the readings. The ship was tiny compared to his own vessels. It looked like it was held together with metal plates and hope, but there was something strange about it. His sensors could not figure out how it had survived traveling through the dangerous space around their planet. Run a deep scan, he ordered. The results made him frown. The ship contained organic life forms unlike anything in the Imperial database. They seemed to be carbon-based, like many species, but their brain patterns were unusual. Even though they were clearly in terrible danger, the life forms inside seemed surprisingly calm. Admiral, they're trying to communicate, his communications officer reported. Put it on speaker. A voice came through the ship's speakers. It spoke in a language none of them had ever heard, but the Imperial computers quickly translated it. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Wanderer. We mean no harm. We are explorers from the planet Earth. We seem to have gotten lost. Can you help us find our way home? Admiral Kethver almost laughed. These creatures had just appeared in the most heavily defended system in the Galactic Empire, and they were asking for directions. This is Admiral Kethver of the Imperial Fleet, he replied. You have entered Zephyrian space without permission. This is an act of war. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. There was a long pause. Then the human voice came back. War? We don't want to fight anyone. We just want to go home. Look, we're obviously not a threat to you. Our ship is tiny. We don't have any real weapons. Can't we just talk about this? The Admiral's officers looked at each other in confusion. In 300 years of Imperial expansion, no one had ever responded to a surrender demand by asking to talk. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, Admiral Kethver said. Any resistance will result in your immediate destruction. Okay, came the human voice. We're powering down. But just so you know, we're going to file a complaint with whoever's in charge around here about your customer service. Several Imperial officers made choking sounds. Customer service? What did that even mean in this context? Back on the Wanderer, Captain Chen turned to her crew. Well, that could have gone better. Captain, what do we do? Dr. Park asked. We stay calm and we stay alive. These people clearly have technology we can't fight. But they also seem to follow some kind of rules. Let's see what they want. The alien boarding party arrived in a flash of light. They appeared on the bridge in environmental suits that looked more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. The leader was tall with blue skin and carried a weapon that hummed with energy. Captain Chun stepped forward with her hands raised. I'm Captain Chun. Welcome to our ship. The alien leader looked around the bridge with obvious confusion. The human technology was so primitive compared to what he was used to. Control panels with actual buttons. Screens that displayed information in simple text. Wire cables running along the walls instead of energy conduits. How did you build a faster-than-light drive with this equipment? He asked. Chief Engineer Rodriguez shrugged. Lots of coffee and very little sleep. Plus, we borrowed some ideas from theoretical physics papers and hoped for the best. The alien stared at him. In the Galactic Empire, faster-than-light technology required massive industrial complexes, rare materials from a dozen worlds, and construction techniques that took decades to perfect. These humans seemed to have built their drive in what looked like a garage. You borrowed ideas and hoped for the best? The alien repeated. Pretty much, Rodriguez said. It's not elegant, but it works. Well, mostly works. Obviously, we still have some bugs to work out with the navigation system. Dr. Park stepped forward. Excuse me, but could you tell us where we are? We're scientists, and we're very curious about your civilization. Your ships are beautiful. What kind of power source do they use? The alien boarding party leader found himself in an unprecedented situation. Usually, when they boarded enemy ships, they faced either terrified surrender or desperate resistance. These humans were asking technical questions like they were at a science conference. You are in Zephyrian space, he said carefully. The core territory of the Galactic Empire. Galactic Empire? Captain Chun asked. How big is it? We control over 50,000 star systems. Pilot Morrison whistled softly. That's a lot of stars. How do you manage communication across such a large area? The speed of light would make it really difficult to coordinate anything. The alien found himself explaining quantum communication networks to a primitive species that should not have been able to understand the concepts. But these humans asked intelligent questions and seemed to grasp the basic principles quickly. After an hour of questioning, the boarding party leader contacted Admiral Kethver. Admiral, these beings are unusual. They show no fear, even though they clearly understand they are outmatched. They are asking about our technology and our government, like they are planning to write a research paper about us. Bring them to the detention center, Admiral Kethver ordered. Command wants to study them before deciding what to do with their homeworld. As the humans were transported off their ship, Captain Chun took one last look around the bridge of the Wanderer. Don't worry, Captain, Rodriguez said quietly. We'll figure out a way home. I'm not worried about getting home, she replied. I'm worried about what happens to Earth when these people find out where we came from. But as they walked toward the alien transport ship, surrounded by technology beyond their comprehension, the humans did something that would become their trademark throughout the galaxy. They started making jokes. Hey, do you think they have good food on their ships? Morrison asked. Better than the rations we brought, Dr. Park replied. I wonder if they play poker, Rodriguez added. The alien guards looked at each other in confusion. These prisoners were either the bravest beings in the galaxy or the most foolish. They had no way of knowing that, for humans, there was often very little difference between the two. The transport ship carried the humans through space for 3 days. During the trip, they were kept in a holding cell with walls made of some kind of energy field. The cell was comfortable enough with beds, a food dispenser, and even a small bathroom. but it was still clearly a prison. At least they're treating us well, Dr. Park said, examining the energy walls with scientific interest. Look at how stable these fields are. The power source must be incredible. I'm more interested in the food dispenser, Rodriguez said, pressing buttons to see what would happen. It seems to read our biological needs and create food that matches our dietary requirements. Captain Chin sat on her bed and thought about their situation. They were prisoners of an empire that controlled 50,000 star systems. Earth didn't even know other intelligent life existed. If these aliens decided humans were a threat, they could destroy Earth before anyone knew what was happening, but worrying wouldn't help anything. She had to focus on keeping her crew alive and finding a way home. The transport ship finally stopped at a massive structure floating in space. It was bigger than any space station humans had ever imagined. The prison complex stretched for kilometers, in every direction with thousands of levels and sections. Detention Complex Omega-7, one of their guards explained as they were moved through the facility. Maximum security. The most dangerous criminals and enemies of the Empire are kept here? Dangerous criminals? Morrison asked. What did we do? We just got lost. The guard looked at him strangely. You entered Imperial space without permission? You refused to surrender immediately when ordered. You asked questions about classified Imperial technology. These are serious crimes. The humans were taken to a high-security wing deep inside the complex. The corridors were filled with cells containing beings from dozens of different species. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that it hurt to look at them directly. Their cell was large enough for all 4 humans, with the same energy walls as the transport ship, but unlike the transport, this cell had neighbors. Welcome to paradise, a voice said from the cell next to them. Captain Chun looked through the transparent energy barrier and saw a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. It had multiple arms and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. I am Klexandra of the Harthek Resistance, the crystal being said. I have been here for 15 Earth years. 15 years? Dr. Park asked. What did you do? I organized protests against Imperial mining operations on my homeworld. Nonviolent protests. We simply refused to work until they stopped poisoning our crystal gardens. On the other side of their cell was another prisoner. This one looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and compound eyes. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music. I am Zithik of the Vextai Collective. I was caught teaching Imperial mathematics to primitive species. The Empire believes knowledge should only flow from the center outward, never between primitives. What did you teach them? Rodriguez asked, his engineering mind immediately interested. How to build better water purification systems. How to treat bacterial infections. How to calculate orbital mechanics for better farming seasons. Captain Chun realized they had been placed among political prisoners, not violent criminals. These beings had been locked up for trying to help others or for refusing to obey unjust laws. That night, as the artificial lights dimmed to simulate evening, Rodriguez was already examining their cell. He poked at the energy walls, tested the food dispenser, and studied the waste disposal system. What are you doing? Dr. Park asked. Learning how this place works, he replied. Look at this waste disposal system. It uses a pneumatic tube network that connects to every cell in the complex. The tubes run on air pressure and simple mechanical switches. So it's a communication network waiting to happen. Over the next few days, Rodriguez worked on his project. He took apart the food dispenser's serving tray and used the metal to create small acoustic amplifiers. He figured out how to send coded tapping signals through the waste disposal tubes. Soon, he had established communication with prisoners 3 levels away. Dr. Park began her own project. She studied the automated systems that kept the prison running. The cleaning robots, the food delivery systems, the maintenance drones that fixed broken equipment. To her trained eye, many of these machines showed signs of intelligence. I think some of these maintenance drones are actually living creatures, she told Captain Chun. What do you mean? Watch how they move. They don't follow simple programming. They adapt to new situations. They seem to communicate with each other. I think the Empire is using enslaved creatures as organic computers. Meanwhile, Captain Chin and Morrison began talking to their fellow prisoners. They learned about dozens of different species, each with their own culture and problems with the Empire. They also learned about the prison's social structure. Most of the prisoners had given up hope long ago. They spent their days sitting in their cells, waiting for death or release that would never come. The different species didn't trust each other. Communication between cells was forbidden and supposedly impossible. That changed when the humans arrived. "Hey, Clexandra," Morrison called through the waste disposal system, using Rodriguez's communication network. "Want to learn how to play." "Poker? What is poker?" The crystal being asked. Morrison spent an hour explaining the rules. By the end of the week, they had organized a prison-wide poker tournament using food ration tokens as currency. Prisoners who hadn't spoken to each other in years were suddenly trading jokes and stories between games. Dr. Park began teaching basic medicine to anyone who would listen. She showed the insectoid Vexti how to treat common injuries using items available in their cells. She taught the crystalline Harthak about human psychological techniques for dealing with stress and depression. Captain Chun organized discussion groups where prisoners could share their stories and learn about each other's cultures. For the first time in decades, the different species began to understand they had more in common than they thought. The prison guards noticed changes in the complex. Security Chief Nexmore reviewed the daily reports with growing confusion. "Incidents of violence are down 60%, he told his assistant. "Prisoners are asking for additional food rations, but not for themselves. They're sharing them with sick inmates." "Is that bad?" his assistant asked. "I don't know. In 30 years of running this prison, I've never seen anything like it." The prisoners are organizing themselves, but not for escape attempts. They're creating some kind of ... community. Should we stop them? Nexmore thought about it. They're not breaking any rules. Sharing food is allowed. Talking to other prisoners isn't forbidden as long as they don't discuss escape plans. And morale improvements usually make our job easier. But he was still worried. Happy prisoners were harder to control than miserable ones. The changes spread beyond the human cell block. Prisoners in other sections heard about the poker games and discussion groups. They started organizing their own activities. The crystal beings began teaching mathematics to anyone interested. The insect people shared their knowledge of engineering and construction. Rodriguez discovered that the prison's computer network had security vulnerabilities that he could exploit without actually breaking into it. Instead of using these to plan an escape, he used them to improve the living conditions for all prisoners. "Look at this," he showed Dr. Park. "The environmental systems are set to minimum acceptable levels. But I can adjust them within legal parameters to make everyone more comfortable." Soon, the air in the prison was cleaner, the lighting was better, and the temperature was more comfortable. The food dispensers started offering more variety in meals. The water recycling systems produced cleaner water. Commandant Valtar, the prison's commanding officer, read the weekly reports with growing alarm. Everything was technically within regulations, but somehow the prison was becoming a more pleasant place to live. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "We're not sure, sir," Security Chief Nexmore replied. "The humans seem to have a natural talent for organization and problem solving. They're teaching other prisoner skills that we didn't know they possessed." "Are they planning an escape?" "We don't think so, sir. Our surveillance shows no escape planning activities. They seem to be focused on improving daily life for all prisoners." Commandant Veltar had never heard of prisoners who improved their prison instead of trying to escape from it. In Imperial training, they had learned about violent rebels and cunning escapists. No one had prepared him for prisoners who made friends with their guards and improved prison efficiency. "Keep watching them," he ordered, "and send a report to Imperial Command. They need to know about this." As their first month in prison ended, Captain Chun looked around at what they had accomplished. The human cell had become a gathering place for prisoners from across the complex. Different species worked together on projects, shared knowledge, and supported each other through difficult times. "You know," Morrison said, "this is the weirdest prison I've ever seen." "You've been in prison before?" Dr. Park asked. "No, but I've watched movies." Prisoners are supposed to plot escapes and fight with guards, not organize educational seminars and improve waste management systems. Emperor Zarthan III sat on his crystallized star throne and read the reports from Detention Complex Omega-7. In his 300 years of rule, he had never seen anything like this. Prisoners who improved their prison instead of trying to escape. Beings who made friends with their captors and organized educational programs. "Bring them to me," he commanded. His advisors looked nervous. "Your Majesty, they are primitives. It would be beneath your dignity to meet with them personally." The Emperor's eyes glowed with ancient power. "I have conquered 1,000 worlds and crushed 100 rebellions. I think I can handle 4 lost primitives. Bring them here." 3 days later, Captain Chun and her crew were loaded onto an Imperial transport ship bound for Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Empire. They traveled through hyperspace corridors that took them past wonders beyond human imagination. Gas giant planets with rings made of pure energy. Star systems where the suns had been rearranged into perfect geometric patterns. Space stations, the size of moons. "This is incredible," Dr. Park whispered, staring out the window. "Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. Maybe millions of years," Rodriguez added. "Look at how they've modified entire solar systems. The engineering required for that is beyond anything we can understand." Morrison pressed his face against the window. "Do you think they have good restaurants here?" Their guards looked at him strangely. Most prisoners being taken to face the Emperor spent the trip in terror. These humans seemed to be treating it like a sightseeing tour. Zephyr Prime was a world-sized city. The entire planet had been converted into one massive urban complex, with buildings that reached up into the clouds and transportation networks that moved millions of beings every minute. The Imperial Palace sat at the center of it all, a structure so large it had its own weather systems. The humans were brought to a preparation chamber where Imperial servants tried to dress them in appropriate clothing for meeting the Emperor. "You must wear these ceremonial robes," one servant explained, holding up flowing garments made of expensive fabric. Captain Chun looked at the robes. They were beautiful, but also clearly designed to make the wearer feel small and insignificant. "Thanks, but we'll stick with our uniforms," she said politely. "They're clean, and they represent our people." The servants were shocked. No one refused imperial ceremonial dress when meeting the Emperor. But the humans had already caused so many unusual situations that the servants decided to let it pass. The throne room was designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. It stretched for several kilometers with a ceiling so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Holographic displays showed the vastness of the empire, with red dots marking the locations of 50,000 conquered worlds. Representatives from hundreds of species lined the walls, all dressed in elaborate costumes that showed their submission to imperial rule. The far end of the room sat Emperor Zarthan III on his throne carved from a crystallized star. Around him, the air itself seemed to shimmer with psychic energy that had driven lesser beings insane. The very ground beneath his throne was made of compressed matter from collapsed stars, so dense that it warped space around it. The humans walked down the long approach to the throne. The journey was designed to take 20 minutes, giving visitors plenty of time to think about their insignificance compared to imperial power. Along the way, they passed monuments to imperial victories, displays of conquered treasures, and holographic recordings of the Emperor's greatest triumphs. Most beings who made this walk arrived at the throne trembling with fear or overwhelmed by the display of power. The humans arrived looking around with obvious curiosity and interest. "Wow," Morrison said, loud enough for half the court to hear. "This place is huge. How do they heat it in winter?" Several imperial courtiers made choking sounds. No one had ever asked about the palace's heating system during a formal audience. Dr. Park was studying the holographic displays with scientific interest. "Excuse me," she called to a nearby Imperial officer. "Could you tell me how you maintain stable holographic projections over such large areas? The power requirements must be enormous." Captain Chun walked up to the base of the throne and looked up at the Emperor. He was tall and imposing, with golden skin and eyes that seemed to contain the light of stars. His presence was designed to make visitors feel like insects in comparison. "Your Majesty," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Captain Sarah Chun. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." The court fell silent. The Emperor stared down at the small human female who had just offered to shake hands with the ruler of the galaxy. "You will prostrate yourself before the Imperial throne," commanded the court herald. Captain Chun looked confused. "Prostrate? You mean lie down on the floor?" "It is the proper way to show respect to His Imperial Majesty." "Oh," Captain Chun said. "Well, where we come from, we show respect by shaking hands and treating people with dignity. Would that be acceptable?" The herald looked like he might faint. In 3 centuries of imperial rule, no one had ever asked if the prostration requirement was negotiable. Emperor Zarthan leaned forward in his throne. These beings were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He found himself curious to discover which. "Tell me," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "what is this Earth you come from?" "Earth is our home planet, Captain," Chun replied. "We have about 8 billion people living there. It's a nice world, mostly water with some land masses. We've got mountains and forests and oceans. The weather can be unpredictable, but that keeps life interesting." "And how many star systems does your empire control?" "Empire? We don't have an empire, Your Majesty. We just have the one planet. We're still learning how to take care of that." The Emperor blinked. A species with faster-than-light travel that controlled only one world? That was impossible. Any species advanced enough to build FTL drives would have already begun expanding across multiple star systems. "How many ships are in your fleet?" he asked. Rodriguez spoke up. "Well, the Wanderer is our first FTL ship. So I guess our fleet has one ship? Had one ship? It's probably been taken apart for study by now." "One ship," the Emperor repeated slowly. "You built faster-than-light technology and only constructed one vessel?" "We wanted to test it first," Dr. Park explained. "It seemed safer to try it with one ship before building more. Good thing, too, since we ended up getting lost on our first flight." The court was buzzing with whispers. A species that built experimental technology and tested it carefully instead of immediately using it for conquest? It didn't fit any known pattern of species development. "What are your intentions toward the Galactic Empire?" the Emperor asked. "Intentions?" Captain Chun looked puzzled. "We didn't even know you existed until 3 weeks ago." "We don't have any intentions toward you. We just want to go home." "Do you not wish to conquer new worlds, expand your territory, gain access to our technology and resources?" The humans looked at each other as if the Emperor had asked them if they wanted to burn down their own house. "Your Majesty," Captain Chun said carefully, "we're having enough trouble taking care of our own planet. We've got climate change, poverty, diseases, and about a dozen other problems to solve. Why would we want to conquer other worlds when we can't even properly manage the one we have?" The Emperor had never heard anything like this in his life. Every species the Empire had ever encountered followed the same pattern: develop technology, expand to nearby systems, compete with neighbors, eventually join the Empire through conquest or voluntary submission. "But you have faster than light travel," he said. "With such technology, you could easily colonize nearby systems." Rodriguez scratched his head. "I suppose we could, but that seems like putting the cart before the horse. We still haven't figured out how to prevent wars on our own planet. It would probably be a bad idea to spread those problems to other worlds." Dr. Park nodded in agreement. "We think it's better to learn how to live properly on one world before we try to live on many worlds." Morrison added his own observation. "Besides, space travel is really expensive. We spent our entire space agency budget just building one experimental ship. The Emperor felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: complete confusion. These beings had the technology for interstellar conquest, but were more worried about managing their budget than expanding their territory. "What do you want from the Empire?" he asked. "Directions home would be nice," Captain Chun replied. "And maybe some information about how you manage such a large territory. We're always interested in learning about different approaches to government and administration." "You want to learn about Imperial administration?" "Sure. Managing 50,000 star systems must require incredible organizational skills. How do you maintain communication across such vast distances? How do you handle resource distribution? What about cultural differences between species? We're social scientists, so this stuff is fascinating to us." The Emperor realized he was being interviewed. These primitive beings were asking him questions about how to run an empire, as if they were students taking notes for a research paper. Chief Advisor Melphas whispered urgently in the Emperor's ear, "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. These beings show no proper fear or—" The transport ship carried the humans to a planet called Kepler 442c, located in a remote corner of the galaxy. It was listed in Imperial records as a primitive reservation, a place where species too interesting to exterminate but too primitive to join the Empire could live out their lives in comfortable exile. The planet was beautiful in an understated way. It had blue skies, green forests, and clean rivers. The climate was mild, and the soil was fertile. Several other species had already been relocated here over the years, each living in their own separate settlements scattered across different continents. "It could be worse," Dr. Park said as their shuttle landed near a prepared settlement. "At least it's not a desert prison planet." The settlement consisted of basic buildings designed to house the human crew. There were living quarters, a small laboratory, a workshop, and a communication center. Everything was functional but simple, designed to keep them comfortable without giving them access to advanced technology. Their Imperial Guards, led by Commander Texwin, showed them around the facility. "You will have access to basic food production equipment, medical supplies, and educational materials," he explained. "A supply ship will visit every 6 months to provide anything you need that cannot be produced locally." "What about the other species on the planet?" Captain Chun asked. "Each group lives in its own designated area. Contact between different species is not forbidden, but it is not encouraged either. Most primitives prefer to keep to themselves." After the guards left, the humans stood in their new settlement and looked around. It was clearly designed to be a comfortable prison, but it was still a prison. "So what do we do now?" Morrison asked. "We make the best of it," Captain Chun replied. "And we start figuring out how to get home eventually." But Rodriguez was already walking toward the edge of the settlement, looking at the landscape beyond. "First, let's find out who our neighbors are." Within a week, the humans had made contact with the nearest alien settlement. It was home to a species called the Vorthen, beings who looked like walking trees with silver bark and leaves that changed color based on their emotions. "We have been here for 23 years, their leader, Canthalan, told the humans. "We were sent here after we refused to allow Imperial mining operations on our home world." "What made your world so special?" Dr. Park asked. "We can manipulate electromagnetic fields naturally. Our bodies generate and control electrical currents. The Empire wanted to use us as living power sources for their machines." Rodriguez's eyes lit up. "That's incredible. Could you show me how that works?" Over the following days, the humans learned that the Vorthen could generate electricity, control magnetic fields, and even communicate through electrical signals across vast distances. It was a natural ability they had never thought to use for anything except daily life on their homeworld. "Have you ever tried combining your electrical abilities with mechanical devices?" Rodriguez asked. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you can control electromagnetic fields, you could probably make machines work much more efficiently. You could improve power systems, create better communication networks, maybe even develop new types of transportation." The Vorthen had never considered using their abilities for technological development. On their homeworld, They had lived simple lives in harmony with nature. The idea of combining organic abilities with mechanical engineering was completely new to them. Within a month, Rodriguez and the Vorthan had built a prototype electrical generator that was 3 times more efficient than anything in the Imperial database. It used Vorthan bioelectricity combined with human engineering principles to create a completely new type of power system. Meanwhile, Dr. Park made contact with another species living on the far side of the continent. The Keth were small, furry creatures who looked harmless but possessed an incredible ability. They could communicate through quantum entanglement across unlimited distances. "It is how our families stay connected," explained Yuthara, one of the Keth leaders. "No matter how far apart we are, we can share thoughts and feelings instantly." "That's amazing," Dr. Park said. "Do you realize what this means?" "You have natural, faster-than-light communication. The Empire probably doesn't even know about this ability. We never told them. It seemed too personal to share with strangers." Dr. Park began working with the Keth to understand their quantum communication abilities. She discovered that they could not only communicate with each other, but could also create communication networks that linked multiple individuals across vast distances. It was like having a natural internet that worked instantly across the entire galaxy. Captain Chun found a third species living in the mountains. The Jeks, they were crystalline beings similar to the prisoners they had met at the detention complex. But these Jeks had been exiled for a different reason. "We see mathematical patterns in everything," their spokesperson, Velcris, explained. "The Empire found our abilities disturbing because we could predict their economic and military strategies by analyzing the mathematical patterns underlying their decisions." "You can predict the future through mathematics?" Captain Chun asked. "Not the future exactly, but probable outcomes based on current patterns. We can see the mathematical relationships that connect all events. It allows us to understand complex systems very quickly." Within 6 months, something unprecedented began happening on Kepler 442c. The different species started working together, sharing their unique abilities and learning from each other. The Vorthan provided bioelectrical power for machines designed using human engineering principles. The Keth created communication networks that allowed instant coordination across the entire planet. The Jeks analyzed the mathematical patterns underlying their combined efforts and suggested improvements that made everything work better. More species joined their growing collaboration. The insectoid Vexti, who had been exiled for teaching mathematics to primitives, found their knowledge eagerly welcomed by the growing alliance. The crystalline Harthak resistance members shared their deep understanding of mineral processing and construction techniques. What started as neighboring settlements became a planet-wide confederation of species working together on common projects. They built better farms, cleaner water systems, more efficient transportation networks, and communication hubs that connected everyone on the planet instantly. The quarterly supply ship from the Empire began reporting unusual readings from the Kepler system. "The primitive settlements are showing signs of technological advancement," the ship's captain reported to Imperial Command. "Energy output is up 400%. They appear to be building structures that are not in our approved designs." Commander Texwin, who supervised the Kepler reservation, requested permission to investigate. When he arrived on the planet, he found something that defied all Imperial understanding of primitive behavior. The humans had built what they called a coordination center in the middle of the main continent. It was a simple but elegant building, where representatives from all the different species met to discuss projects and share information. The building itself used Vorthan bioelectricity, Jek's mathematical optimization, and human engineering principles to create a structure that was more efficient than most Imperial buildings. "What is this?" Commander Texwin demanded when he met with Captain Chun. "It's a meeting hall," she replied. "We use it to coordinate projects between the different settlements. You are supposed to live separately, each species in its own area. The regulations say we're not forbidden from contacting each other, so we contacted each other. Is that a problem?" Commander Texwin read through the regulations again. Technically, interspecies contact was not prohibited on primitive reservations. The Empire had never bothered to forbid it because primitives never cooperated with each other anyway. "What are these projects you coordinate?" Captain Chun led him on a tour of their achievements. Farms that produced more food per acre than Imperial agricultural worlds. Water purification systems that were cleaner and more efficient than Imperial standard equipment. Transportation networks that moved people and goods with less energy waste than Imperial systems. "How are you doing this?" Commander Texwin asked. "We share knowledge," Dr. Park explained. "Each species has different natural abilities and different perspectives on problems. When we combine them, we can find solutions that none of us could discover alone. But these are primitive species. You should not be capable of such advancement," Rodriguez laughed. "Commander, that's the problem with calling us primitive. You assume primitive means stupid. But primitive just means we use different approaches than you do. Sometimes different approaches work better." Commander Texwin filed a detailed report with Imperial Command. Within days, Intelligence Officer Yelton was reviewing disturbing information from multiple sources. Similar improvements were appearing throughout Imperial space. Escaped prisoners were spreading human organizational methods to other worlds. Planets that had been quiet for decades were suddenly showing signs of increased efficiency, better resource management, and improved interspecies cooperation. "It's like an infection," Yelton reported to the High Command. "But instead of making things worse, it's making things better. And that makes it more dangerous than any rebellion we've ever faced." 2 years after their arrival on Kepler 442c, Captain Chun stood in the command center of their first starship. The vessel didn't look like anything in the Imperial fleet. It was smaller, more practical, built from materials contributed by dozens of different species. The Vorthan had provided bioelectrical systems. The Keth had installed quantum communication arrays. The Jex had optimized every system using mathematical principles the Empire had never discovered. "Final systems check complete," Rodriguez reported from the engineering station. "All systems are operating within normal parameters." "Communications are ready," Dr. Park announced from her position. "We have contact with Confederation worlds in 12-star systems." Morrison looked up from the navigation console. "Course plotted for Zephyr Prime, Captain. Though I still think this is a crazy idea." Captain Chin smiled. "Jake, we've been doing crazy things since we got lost 2 years ago. Why stop now?" Their ship, which they had named the Unity, lifted off from Kepler 442c and jumped to hyperspace. Their destination was the capital of the Galactic Empire. They were going to do something no one had ever done before. They were going to ask the Emperor to negotiate. On Zephyr Prime, Admiral Kethver received the alert with disbelief. A single ship had appeared at the edge of the system and was broadcasting a message on all Imperial frequencies. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Kepler Confederacy vessel Unity," the transmission said. "I am requesting an audience with Emperor Zarthan III to discuss matters of mutual importance to the Empire and the growing Confederation of Independent Worlds." "Kepler Confederacy?" Admiral Kethver asked his communications officer. "What is that?" "Unknown, sir. Our records show only a primitive reservation on Kepler 442c. Within minutes, the Admiral's screens showed him sensor readings of the approaching vessel. It was unlike anything in Imperial records. The ship's design combined technologies from multiple species in ways that should have been impossible. Its energy signature was completely unknown. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, "the vessel appears to be unarmed. No weapon signatures detected. That's impossible. No one approaches the Imperial capital without weapons." "Sir, our scans are definitive. The ship has no offensive capabilities whatsoever." Admiral Kethver had never encountered a situation like this. The standard Imperial response to unauthorized ships was to destroy them immediately. But this ship was broadcasting peaceful intentions, claimed to represent something called a confederation, and was apparently unarmed. "Deploy the home fleet," he ordered. "Full battle formation. And get me a direct line to the Imperial Palace." Within hours, the Unity found itself surrounded by hundreds of Imperial warships. Each one was larger and more heavily armed than the small Confederation vessel. The combined firepower of the home fleet could have destroyed entire star systems. Captain Chun looked at the massive ships surrounding them and felt a familiar mixture of awe and determination. The Imperial vessels were beautiful and terrifying, designed to inspire fear and demonstrate overwhelming power. "Open a channel to the flagship," she ordered. Admiral Kethver's face appeared on their main screen. He looked exactly the same as when they had first met him 2 years earlier, but his expression was different. Instead of casual dismissal, there was genuine confusion. "Captain Chun," he said, "you were supposed to be living quietly on a reservation planet? How do you have a faster-than-light vessel?" "We built it, Admiral, with help from our friends." "Friends?" "The other species on Kepler 442c and the species on 11 other worlds, who decided they liked our approach better than the Imperial system." Admiral Kethver studied the sensor readings again. The ship's technology was clearly advanced, but it didn't match any Imperial designs. Somehow, these primitives had developed their own technological base. "What do you want?" he asked. "To talk to the Emperor. We have a proposal that might interest him." Before Admiral Kethver could respond, another voice cut into the conversation. It was Emperor Zarthan III himself, speaking from his palace. "Let them through, Admiral. I want to hear what they have to say." An hour later, Captain Chun and her crew stood once again in the Emperor's throne room. But this time, the situation was completely different. They weren't prisoners being judged. They were representatives of an independent government requesting a diplomatic meeting. "So," the Emperor said, leaning forward in his crystallized star throne, "you have built your own civilization." "Yes, Your Majesty, we call it the Kepler Confederacy. It includes 12 star systems and growing." "And you came here to surrender it to Imperial rule?" Captain Chun shook her head. "No, Your Majesty, we came here to offer you an alternative." The court fell silent. In 3 centuries of Imperial rule, no one had ever offered the Emperor an alternative to anything. "What kind of alternative?" the Emperor asked. Dr. Park stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we've spent 2 years studying the Empire's structure and comparing it to our own system. We found some interesting patterns." She activated a portable holographic projector that displayed charts and graphs. "The Empire controls 50,000 star systems through military force. But maintaining that control requires enormous resources. You spend 60% of your total production on military expenses." "Military strength is necessary for order," the Emperor replied. "We agree that order is important," Rodriguez added. "But we found a more efficient way to maintain it. In our Confederation, worlds stay together because they want to, not because they're forced to. That means we can spend our resources on improving life for everyone instead of building weapons to threaten each other." Morrison brought up another holographic display. "Look at these productivity numbers, Your Majesty. Our Confederation worlds are producing 30% more goods per capita than equivalent Imperial worlds, with 50% less resource waste." The Emperor studied the data with growing interest. "How is this possible?" "Voluntary cooperation," Captain Chun explained. "When people work together because they choose to, they work harder and more efficiently. When they're forced to work together, they spend energy resisting that force." "But without military control, how do you prevent rebellion and chaos?" "By making sure people don't want to rebel," Dr. Park replied. "We give everyone a voice in decisions that affect them. We share resources fairly. We help each other solve problems instead of competing for dominance." The Emperor sat back in his throne, processing this information. "And you want me to, what? Abandon the Imperial system and adopt your methods?" "Not abandon," Captain Chun said carefully. "Adapt, Your Majesty. You're incredibly good at organizing large-scale operations. The Empire's logistics networks are amazing. Your communication systems span the galaxy. Your technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. But you're using all that incredible capability to force people to obey you instead of inspiring them to work with you." Imagine what you could accomplish if all 50,000 Imperial worlds were contributing their best efforts willingly instead of reluctantly. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that would change galactic history. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership, Captain Chun replied. The Empire and the Confederacy working together as equals, sharing knowledge, resources, and responsibilities. You keep your advanced technology and organizational skills. We contribute our approaches to cooperation and voluntary association, and if I refuse, then we continue growing. More worlds join the Confederacy every month. Eventually you'll face a choice between destroying half the galaxy to maintain Imperial control, or accepting that people have found a better way to live together. The Emperor looked around his court. His advisors were shocked into silence. His military commanders were calculating the resources needed to crush a rebellion spread across hundreds of worlds. His economic ministers were studying the efficiency reports with obvious interest. You're not threatening me, the Emperor said. You're offering me a choice. Yes, Your Majesty. We believe in letting people make their own decisions. Emperor Zarthan III had ruled the galaxy for 300 years through strength, fear, and superior technology. He had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and built the largest empire in galactic history. But he had never faced anything like this. These humans hadn't defeated him in battle. They hadn't outsmarted his technology or overpowered his military. They had simply offered people something better than what he provided, and people had chosen to accept it. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor felt something he had almost forgotten, curiosity about the future. I will consider your proposal, he said finally. But I want to see this confederation of yours for myself. You're welcome to visit any time, Your Majesty. We'd be honored to show you what we've built. 6 months later, Emperor Zarthan III signed the Treaty of Mutual Recognition with the Kepler Confederacy. The Empire remained, but it was no longer alone in the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, it faced equals who had achieved their status not through conquest, but by convincing others that there was a better way to live among the stars. As Captain Chun watched the signing ceremony, Admiral Kethver approached her. I still don't understand how beings with such primitive technology managed to threaten the greatest empire in galactic history, he said.